Okay, so the last time we looked at how to use radiance to calculate the daylighting in your room. Now this time we're going to do something a little more interesting with radiance, which is to visualize that in a way that can be kind of useful. So I've changed the model a wee bit since the other models that we used, and the main change I've done is I've made it a whole lot smaller. And there's a reason for that, just so that we don't put too much pressure on radiance. Bigger the model means the longer it's going to take to figure things out. So I've tried to make it as small as possible and delete as many unnecessary things as I can, such as that. So when I click this button here, Fit Grids, it should be really as small as it possibly can be. Now that's the first thing I've done. The second thing I've done is I have introduced a wee bit of furniture. Not much, but I've just put a table in there. I just imported it from Rhino, but I made sure it was a fairly basic table. Again, I don't want to put too much pressure on radiance. You can, but it just takes a long time. So the table's gone into the room there. The other thing I've done, and I'll just isolate the internal wall so you can see, pressing F4, is I've assigned reflectances, say colors, to the different surfaces. So reflectance is a value between 0 and 1, 0 being fully black and 1 being fully white. So generally we would say, picking the floor there as a surface, if I pick that there, when I pick in the black and white flag, I can select what type of surface it is. It's a floor, and I've just, the surface isn't actually concrete, but I'm just using that because actually what I'm trying to do is just define a reflectance value. So I double clicked on that figure there. It gives me a surface reflectivity between 0 and 1. I'm going to make that 0.25, which is typically what we would use. I'm going to say apply to both, which means in Ecotech language applying to both sides of the surface. And I'm going to keep doing that for all the surfaces of my room, picking all the walls in turn and setting them to the correct type. So wall, frame plasterboard. I double click there, edit the color, and I'm going to set the walls to 0.5, again twice as much as the floor. Apply to both, yes, apply changes to close. And finally the ceiling, I'm just going to pick that there. Again it's set to ceiling, and it's a plaster joint suspended, and we're just going to set the color to 0.75. So generally for this run I just want you to stick to walls, floor and ceiling being those three reflectances, 0.75 for the ceiling, 0.5 for the walls, 0.25 for the floor, and apply to both. That's yes. Right, when we've done that, the last thing we have to do in order to visualize this is view it from somewhere. So I'm going to use this tool, the camera tool, and I'm going to use interactively and place a camera, which is pretty easy to do. It just requires me to start somewhere and look somewhere. When I do that, I get the cone of the camera view. Now, Ecotech doesn't place things at eye level immediately, which is a bit frustrating, so I'm just going to select the camera and press this transform, and I'm just going to move it on the z-axis up by 1800 mil, which means it's going to actually be at eye level. Now to see what that sees, if you click into visualize again, a new tab will have appeared. This is camera wide angle. That's the camera we just set up. If I click on that, I'm going to see what it sees, which is the window which I looked at. Okay, so that's fine. Let's turn everything back on by pressing F4. That turns on my glass and the frame on the table which I put in there. And I'm now going to do pretty much the same thing I did last time and export it to radiance. Clicking here, which is the export manager, and clicking here, which is the export model data. Again, keeping my names very short, I'm just going to call this guy 3 and click there. And it's the same sequence you went before. We're going to pick lux as a luminance. We're going to go final render this time. Again, cloudy sky, and again, Ecotech angles. And again, in the interior view, I've made the image size a wee bit bigger this time, 1024 by 768. That's just what looks a little better. And again, my camera, I only have one camera, that's the one I picked, which is the wide angle camera. I've made the accuracy high in this case because I think for images it does matter. It does take a little while, almost frustratingly long time, but kind of thing I usually let my computer run overnight when I'm doing this. So I'm going to set it to high and then show you what that looks like. Press next. Again, all these must be ticked. If unfortunately for you it isn't all ticked, then maybe have a look at the previous tutorial where I've explained how to fix that. Okay, so that gets us to the summary page. Nothing to say here other than usually what I do is I just increase the number of reflections to about 6. It takes a little longer, but it looks a little better. And then I press OK. Again, Ecotect warns me that it doesn't like long names, but just press OK to that, and it'll go. And it'll start thinking for quite a while. Okay, finally, when it comes to the end of its calculation, you will see in this radiance dialog box it says launching image viewer, and the image viewer is something that you'll find as a new window which looks like this. So here's our image that Radiance has outputted us. Now it has what you'd expect to have: our window and our table. But unlike an image that you would have got from a rendering package, this image has information on it. Because if I click with my mouse on any part of the image, it will tell me what the illuminance at that point is. This is super useful because then I can really understand what I have on my table as my design allowed for. We can do that anywhere in the room actually, and it's a really handy way of trying to read that image. We can right click that image and copy it to the clipboard, and then if we go to something like Photoshop, you can paste it in there as a image, the DPI of which you would have picked in when you exported it. The other thing we can do here is we can also read it in a different way. We can put it as what's called a false color image. Now, false color is really handy because it does this. Recalculates, but then it gives you slightly blue and green. Now if I change the scale of that to make it slightly lower, let's say the maximum I'm going to do is 300 lux, and I recalculate that, and there's another wee think. This is really handy for you to kind of read your images in terms of quantifying daylight levels, and again you can just copy that out, put it into Photoshop. And again, the scale bar on the left is what's going to tell you what you're looking at. Really handy tool. Okay, so only one other thing to show you, which is pretty much the same, but just a different way to set up a camera. So this time, instead of setting up a camera inside the room, I'm actually going to set it up outside the room. I'm going to set up a camera. This is in plan outside the side of my house there. Now, one of the things you can do when you set up a camera, if you click on your materials and double click type of camera you picked, you've 3 types: you have a normal or parallel or a wide angle. This is a wide angle camera. You double click on that. One of the things I can set on it is the clipping plane on the front. So I'm going to set this clipping plane just at, say, 8 meters, 8,000 millimeters, and apply that change. And what I see in my field of vision is this line here. That is a line which is Ecotect's or Radiance is going to clip its image for that line. This is a really handy tool because it allows us basically to see inside of buildings and cut sections. So I'm just going to move it just so that just cuts inside that room, still picks up that room there, picks up that, and then cuts through that roof right at the end. And once I can see it in plan, I know it's going to happen in Radiance. I just need to check, as before, it is again on the ground. I'm just going to raise it up to eye level, and then just check and visualize. Visualize won't be very useful in this instance because I'm just going to be looking at the side of my building in Ecotect. but when I do it in radiance it'll know better. So let's do that. Export data. Again, I'm going to call it 7 as the next number. Press OK. And as we did before, go through all of these until we get to the final one. Press OK. Now I've already done this, so I'm just going to show you what the output is. That's the section I cut. There's the first room we did with the table there, and there are the other ones in the apartment. Cutting through that one room, which is the bathroom, which in this model has no daylight and therefore is black. And this is a really useful thing because this really then allows you to look at entire buildings. And again, depending on where you set up your camera, if you do it in plan or if you do it in section, it allows you to look at different spaces and different light levels in those different spaces in a way that wouldn't otherwise be possible. And again, we can do the same things we did before. We can look at false color. If I set that to 500, press go, we'll have a wee think, and then it will provide that false color image. Or if I want to do a different one, I always have to go back to the first one, which is my base image if I want to do something. If I want to change the exposure to make it brighter, that's just a question of changing this number here. I'm going to change it to exposure 3. That's what I showed you the first time. And then I could look at other things, for instance contour lines. If I made that 300, that will give me contours of equal illuminance, such as that. So useful things to understand what you've designed.